Obi never saw anything good in his wife. At every opportunity, he would complain to anyone willing to listen. Adanma is lazy, she's fat, and she's ugly. How does she even bear the name Adanma? What was I thinking when I married her? His disdain for her was so deep that he couldn't see any of her good qualities. Whenever Obi traveled, he would deliberately avoid informing Adanma about his whereabouts, leaving her to wonder and worry. Often, she cried herself to sleep, thinking about the life she used to have. In her youth, she had been vibrant and full of energy, with many suitors seeking her hand in marriage. One man, User, stood out in particular. They had shared a strong, long-lasting friendship that blossomed into a romance. Together, they had big dreams for their future. But her parents disapproved of User, deeming him unsuitable for their daughter. They insisted that she end the relationship immediately. Heartbroken, User and Adanma made secret plans to elope. However, their plan was exposed just before they could carry it out, shattering Adanma's hopes. Not wanting to risk losing their daughter to User, her parents arranged for her to marry Obi instead. Adanma was lost in these painful memories when a loud noise at the door abruptly pulled her back to the present. Her parents entered the room with stern faces. "What is this we are hearing about you, that?" Before they could finish, Obi staggered into the room. But he wasn't alone. His face was twisted in confusion, and Adanma and her parents stared in shock. Marzi, a close and trusted friend of Obi, had grown accustomed to hearing his endless grievances about Adanma. Obi never missed a chance to paint a negative picture of his wife, casting her as the root of all his frustrations. "She's lazy," he would often say, "and such a poor excuse for a wife. She can't even cook a decent meal, and don't even get me started on her looks. How did I ever end up with her?" These complaints were so frequent that Marzi, despite never having met Adanma, believed every word. He concluded that Adanma was beyond redemption, and that Obi deserved better. Marzi, always quick to offer advice, fully supported Obi's decision to marry another wife and rid himself of Adanma once and for all. The truth, however, was that Marzi had never laid eyes on Adanma. He had no first-hand knowledge of her character or abilities, but Obi's complaints had shaped his perceptions. In his mind, she was a terrible homemaker, a woman who couldn't keep her house in order or prepare a proper meal. The only thing Marzi didn't accuse her of was infidelity. Everything else, he held her responsible for. It was Marzi who, eager to help Obi in his quest for a new wife, introduced him to his niece, Awil. Awil was a beautiful woman but had long passed the typical age of marriage in their community. She was now seen as an old maid, and Marzi believed she would jump at the chance to marry Obi, despite him already having a wife. What Marzi didn't know was that Awil had a suitor, a man named Willie, who was deeply in love with her. However, Willie's one flaw, at least in Awil's eyes, was his very short stature. This made Awil hesitant to fully commit to him, and their relationship had remained secret for some time. She feared the judgment of the community, knowing that people often gossiped about such things. When Obi's proposal came along, Awil saw it as a golden opportunity. Here was a man who could elevate her status, a man with more social standing than Willie. Despite Obi already being married to Adanma, Awil convinced herself that this was her chance to escape the limbo of her secret relationship with Willie. Without much thought, she eagerly accepted Obi's advances, excited about the prospect of becoming his second wife. Willie, however, was not blind to the changes in Awil's behavior. Sensing that something was amiss, he began investigating quietly. It wasn't long before he learned of her secret involvement with Obi. Crushed by the revelation, Willie was heartbroken but determined to fight for Awil's affection. In a desperate bid to win her over, he began showering her with expensive gifts, beautiful fabrics, jewelry, and even promises of a house. He pleaded with her to marry him at once, eager to formalize their relationship before Obi could swoop in and take her away. Awil, caught in the middle, found herself torn between the two men. On one hand, there was Willie, who loved her deeply but whose short stature made her hesitant. On the other hand, there was Obi, a man of status, who could offer her security, but whose first wife was still very much in the picture. What should have been a time of joy, finally receiving the marriage proposals she had long prayed for, became a source of deep turmoil and confusion for her. Every day, she wavered between the two men, unable to decide which path to take. As Willie grew more impatient and suspicious, he decided to take matters into his own hands. Enraged by the idea that a wheel could choose Obi over him, he began plotting his revenge. He wanted to teach Obi a lesson, to send a clear message that no one could take what belonged to him. Willie's plan was simple but effective: eliminate Obi from a wheel's life, one way or another. Meanwhile, in the town, gossip spread like wildfire. Word of Obi's secret affair with a wheel had reached the ears of the town's notorious rumormongers. It didn't take long for the news to reach Adanma's parents. Shocked and appalled, they couldn't believe what they were hearing. They had raised their daughter with strong moral values, teaching her the importance of a good home and respectful marriage. Adanma had never spoken of any problems in her marriage, so the news that her husband was planning to take another wife blindsided them. Confused and deeply concerned, Adanma's parents couldn't sit idly by. They knew their daughter to be diligent and respectful, traits she had displayed throughout her upbringing. The thought of her being blamed for marital issues didn't sit right with them. If their daughter was suffering in silence, they needed to know the truth. With heavy hearts, they set out to visit her, determined to uncover what was truly happening. Obi could hardly contain his excitement as he drove to pick up groceries and gifts for a wheel. His heart raced with a kind of giddiness he hadn't felt in years. Every thought of a wheel seemed to ignite something youthful in him. With her, he envisioned a life full of joy and adventure, a stark contrast to what he considered his dull, miserable existence with Adanma. It didn't even cross his mind that he had never treated Adanma this way. For years, he had rarely bought her anything, not even small tokens of affection. But for a wheel, he wanted to shower her with gifts to show his appreciation and devotion. He picked up his phone and called Marzi, his trusted friend and confidant. "Marzi, my friend, join me for some shopping. I have to get a few things for a wheel," Obi said, a grin spreading across his face. Marzi chuckled on the other end of the line, pleased with Obi's obvious delight. He had been the one to introduce a wheel to Obi, and now, seeing how the relationship was blossoming, he felt a sense of accomplishment. "I'm on my way, Obi." "You've never sounded so happy," Marzi replied. As they drove through town, Obi couldn't stop thanking Marzi. "You brought light back into my life, my friend. A wheel is everything I needed. Once this marriage happens, you'll get a reward you won't forget." He winked, causing Marzi to laugh heartily. The prospect of his friend marrying a younger, more vibrant woman seemed to breathe new life into Obi, and Marzi was happy to be part of it. However, their joy was cut short the moment they stepped out of their vehicle at the market. Two burly men appeared out of nowhere, as if they had been waiting for Obi. Before he could even register what was happening, they grabbed him roughly by the collar and threw him against the side of the car. What is going on?" Obi stammered, his heart pounding. Without uttering a word, the men began pummeling him. Fists flew at his face and stomach, the impact making him crumple to the ground. Marzi stood in shock, rooted to the spot, watching his friend get beaten mercilessly. He had no idea what to do. How could he intervene in something he didn't understand? The sound of fists hitting flesh echoed in the air, drawing the attention of passers-by, but no one dared to step in. As Obi lay on the ground, clutching his ribs and gasping for breath, one of the men leaned down and hissed in his ear, "Stay away from a wheel. This is your final warning." Then, just as quickly as they had appeared, the men vanished, leaving Obi crumpled and broken on the pavement. Marzi rushed over, his heart thudding in his chest. "Obi, are you okay? We need to get you to the hospital," he urged, trying to help his friend to his feet. But Obi, prideful and humiliated, shook his head, wincing in pain. "I'll be fine," Obi croaked, his voice barely above a whisper. He was too proud to show weakness, even in front of his closest friend. Meanwhile, across the globe, Yuza's life couldn't have been more different. After parting ways with Adanma all those years ago, he had thrown himself into building a life of success. Determined to prove himself, he had left Nigeria and moved to the United States, where he pursued a degree in engineering. His hard work paid off, and soon, he landed a well-paying job with a prestigious firm. His success made him the envy of many, but his heart remained scarred from the breakup with Adanma. It was in the US that he met Izzy, a brilliant and beautiful woman who worked at his company. She reminded him of Adanma in so many ways, the warmth of her smile, the compassion in her eyes. It didn't take long for their professional relationship to blossom into romance, and before he knew it, they were married in a small, intimate ceremony. Yuza felt like he had finally moved on, but there was still a part of him that held on to memories of Adanma. When Yuza and Izzy decided to visit Nigeria, Yuza couldn't shake the thought of reuniting with Adanma, if only to close the chapter of their unfinished story. He imagined introducing Izzy to her and her family, perhaps rekindling a friendship that had once meant so much to him. In his mind, he pictured their families growing close, maybe even vacationing together in the US. He wanted to share his success with the people who had once been part of his life. Upon arriving in Nigeria, Yuza contacted a couple of old friends who had known him during his time with Adanma. The friends were quick to offer to take him and Izzy to Adanma's home, eager to see how the visit would unfold. Yuza was excited. He brought gifts for Adanma and her family, tokens of appreciation and friendship. He hoped she had found happiness in her marriage, even though part of him still wondered what could have been. But when Yuza arrived at Adanma's house, the scene that greeted him was far from the joyous reunion he had imagined. Adanma's parents were already there, their faces etched with worry and concern. They had come to investigate troubling rumors about their daughter's marriage, rumors that Adanma had kept hidden from them. And then there was Obi, slumped on a chair, his face bruised and swollen from the earlier beating. He looked like a man who had lost control of his life, a far cry from the confident and proud man Yuza had once known. Adanma stood in the center of it all, her face a picture of calm dignity. Despite the chaos around her, she remained composed, her eyes betraying none of the turmoil she must have felt inside. Yuza's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't changed much, she was still as graceful and serene as ever. He was relieved to see her looking well, even if the atmosphere in the house was thick with tension. Marzi, who had often believed Obi's complaints about Adanma, was taken aback. This wasn't the lazy, unattractive woman Obi had described for years. She was beautiful, poised, and clearly not the source of the marital strife Obi had led him to believe. Marzi glanced at his friend, wondering how Obi could have been so blind. Before anyone could speak, the door swung open again, and two armed men entered the room. Behind them stood a wheel, her expression cold and resolute. She had come to confront Obi in person, and the sight of her sent a ripple of unease through the room. Mars's face went pale as he realized the gravity of the situation. He hadn't expected a wheel to show up, and certainly not with armed men by her side. A wheel strode into the room, her eyes fixed on Obi. "I warned you, didn't I?" she said, her voice low and menacing. The armed men flanked her, their presence a clear indication that this was no idle threat. "You should have stayed away from me." The room fell into an uneasy silence. Adanma's parents exchanged worried glances, still trying to piece together what was happening. Yuza, standing beside Izzy, was caught off guard by the drama unfolding before him. This was far from the reunion he had imagined, and now, it seemed, the true nature of Obi's infidelity and his dangerous entanglement with a wheel had come to light. A wheel had been growing suspicious for a long time, her intuition hinting at something sinister lurking beneath Obi's charming exterior. She was convinced that he was living a double life, and she needed to find out the truth before it was too late. One evening, after hearing whispers from a reliable source, the full weight of Obi's deception crashed down on her like a wave. The source confirmed her worst fears. Obi was deeply involved in a secret cult, one that promised unimaginable riches in exchange for disturbing sacrifices. The most horrifying part was the vow he had taken, a vow to be childless, along with his wife, as a token of commitment to the cult. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place. This was why Adanma, his wife, had remained childless for so long. It was no accident, it was part of the dark ritual that governed Obi's life. Awil was horrified. She remembered how affectionless Obi had been toward Adanma, his coldness and disinterest now making terrifying sense. The cult's influence on him had eroded any capacity for genuine love or care. Worse still, Awil discovered that Obi's wealth was built on the back of human sacrifice. Each woman he led into the cult's trap boosted his fortune. And now, he had marked Awil as his next victim. She was to be sacrificed to secure even greater wealth for him. The revelation left Awil shaken to her core. She knew she couldn't keep quiet. It was a matter of life and death. She decided to act swiftly and expose Obi before it was too late. Without a second thought, Awil gathered all those closest to Obi and Adanma, demanding they meet at Adanma's house for what would be an explosive confrontation. When everyone had assembled in the dimly lit room, Awil's heart pounded in her chest. Without mincing words, she stood up, her voice trembling yet firm. She divulged the horrifying secret she had uncovered: Obi's involvement in the cult, the sacrifices, and the vow that had cursed Adanma to a childless marriage. The room fell silent, each word she uttered hitting like a thunderclap. No one could believe what they were hearing. It was as though the ground had shifted beneath their feet. Obi, unable to face the reality of his own treachery, passed out from shock. Adanma's mother, overwhelmed by the weight of the revelations, fainted on the spot. The scene was chaotic, people gasping, shouting, trying to make sense of what had just transpired. Awil's uncle, Marzi, stood in disbelief, frozen by the knowledge that he had been the one to push her into this toxic relationship. His own guilt weighed heavily on him, as he realized how deeply he had entangled Awil in Obi's dangerous web. Adanma's father, speechless and dumbfounded, stared into the distance, as if trying to wake from a nightmare. Yuza and Izzy, old friends who had returned from abroad, wished they could disappear from the mess unfolding in front of them. They had come hoping to support Adanma, but now found themselves in the midst of a shocking drama that none of them had anticipated. Suddenly, Obi stirred from his unconscious state. His body trembled, and he let out a deep, sorrowful moan. Tears filled his eyes as he realized the gravity of the choices he had made. "I took the wrong path," he lamented, his voice thick with regret. "I lost everything. I lost myself." Adanma's mother, who had regained consciousness, wailed uncontrollably. Her sobs filled the room as she clutched her daughter, devastated by the realization that she had pushed Adanma into a marriage that had destroyed her happiness. The burden of guilt weighed heavily on her heart. She had always thought she was doing what was best for her daughter, but now, she saw how deeply she had erred. Meanwhile, the police had arrived, and Obi was taken away in handcuffs. His once proud stature now hunched and defeated. He had built his fortune on lies and dark rituals, but in the end, it had cost him everything. Adanma stood in a corner of the room, silent tears streaming down her face. Her mind was racing, not only with the pain of her husband's betrayal but also the unexpected sight of Yuza. He had come to her house with his wife, Izzy, and their presence brought a flood of memories from their past together. Mixed emotions churned within her: relief at seeing an old friend, but also the crushing realization that any hope of rekindling their relationship had been snuffed out. As Obi was led away, Marzi could only shake his head in disbelief. This was the man he had once trusted, a friend he had vouched for. Now, he felt like a fool for ever believing in Obi's facade. He thanked God that he hadn't rushed to arrest Willie, another man he had once been suspicious of. Now, it was a debate among the villagers whether Awil or Willie had been responsible for beating up Obi earlier, but Marzi no longer cared. His heart was heavy with disappointment, and he wanted nothing more to do with Obi. As the dust settled, Marzi's thoughts turned to Adanma. He felt a deep sorrow for the anguish she had endured with such grace. What kind of man would miss the chance to love a woman like her? He thought sadly, realizing that Obi had thrown away something precious. Adanma, her voice weak but resolute, cried out in pain, "I am no longer Adanma. I am Ada Oho, the daughter of sorrow. What did my parents force me into?" In the following days, life slowly moved forward. Awil, relieved to have escaped Obi's grasp, rushed back to Willie, the man she had come to love. They wasted no time and soon got married, eager to start a new life together. Meanwhile, Yuza and Izzy returned to the United States, where they continued their loving life, thankful to have avoided the catastrophe that had unfolded in Nigeria. As for Obi, his past caught up with him in more ways than one. He was imprisoned for 2 years, serving time for the crimes connected to his cult involvement. During his time behind bars, Obi underwent a profound transformation. Guilt and remorse gnawed at him, and he resolved to change. Upon his release, he enrolled in a Bible school, finding solace in faith. Soon, he became a pastor, dedicating his life to serving God and righting his wrongs. Obi wasn't finished seeking redemption. After many sleepless nights and heartfelt prayers, he decided to chase after Adanma, hoping to rekindle their relationship. She was hesitant at first, still nursing the deep wounds of betrayal. But after persistent pleas from friends, family, and even members of the church, she eventually consented. They reconciled and began a new chapter together. Their love slowly bloomed again, and soon they were blessed with 2 beautiful children. Years later, Obi and Adanma visited User and Izzy in the United States, bringing their children along. The 2 families bonded, their children playing together as though they had known each other forever. As they sat around the dinner table, reminiscing about the past and marveling at how far they had all come, Adanma smiled a genuine, unburdened smile and declared proudly, "Now, I can answer my name again. I am Adanma." Thank you for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe to my YouTube channel.